Alright, we're live, ladies and germs. For once, we actually got a good race. Like a race that I can actually say was pretty solid. Because the races the last couple weeks have been, well, man. But I can actually say that tonight's race at Wetkins, Glen was pretty solid overall. Of course, when you count the craziness of that first stage with the wet, having a race on the wet tires, then that makes it a lot better. But it's probably going to be another short review because I don't really have a whole lot to say. Because once again, a light news week, and not really a whole lot of complaints tonight. So let's get into it. This is the fuel, as my shitty likes to get in the camera once again, you little shit. Anyways, this is the fuel. What's happening, ladies and germs? This is the Packer Man, and welcome to tonight's edition of The Fuel, where tonight we're going to be talking about the 2022 GoBowling.com at the Glen from Wetkins Glen International, the fifth road course of the season of 6. Sorry, I was looking at something on my phone. So what did I think about this race? Honestly, it was pretty solid. Pretty solid race tonight, or today, or whatever, what the hell you want to call it. I don't really have a whole lot to say, other than the fact that it was pretty clean for the most part, except for a couple instances near the end, but there weren't any like big pile-ups like we typically see at Wetkins Glen. So, like I said, not really a whole hell of a lot to talk about in this case. Give me 1 second here. By the way, I am up to 132 subscribers. I know a lot of that has had to do with my Elliot got robbed. I mean, perhaps, but what Elliot could have done was take the inside line. I mean, I can understand taking the outside line because you have more metal around the outside, but the problem is when you take the outside line, especially on a late race restart, you're leaving yourself open for a dive bomb on that inside line. And that's precisely what happened. And I know some people might say, well, Larson was rough with Elliott, I don't really agree with that. I mean, it's not like he wrecked him or slammed him out of the way. I mean, did he push him out of the line? Perhaps. But with a few laps to go on a late race restart with a chance to win the race, all bets are off. And I don't advocate wrecking anybody ever, especially your teammate. But honestly, I don't think what Larson did was I don't think Larson did anything wrong in that case. I mean, did he run his teammate wide? Yeah, but with a few laps to go, it's every man for himself. And as important as these playoff points can be, I mean, we've seen in the past how 1 point can make the difference between making the next round or not. Every point helps. And let's be honest here, Larson has been starving for a win. The last time he went to victory lane in the Cup Series was all the way back at Auto Club back in February, which was 6 months ago. And this is, Larson, who's coming off, a 10-win season, a championship-winning 10-win season, and all of a sudden he gets the win at Auto Club, and a lot of people are like, oh shit, here we go again. And then he goes winless for the next 6 months, which is just unusual. It's not like Larson hasn't been running good. I mean, the top fives are there. He's been running good, he just hasn't been able to close the deal until today. And maybe Elliott did get robbed a little bit, because I think, honestly, the Joey Hand caution was unnecessary, because Joey Hand did get it back going again. Maybe they threw the caution because they had to get the tire barrier back in order. But even then, that's a wishy-washy caution. The third and final caution, I mean, they didn't really have any choice, because once a car gets stuck in that sand trap, I mean, there's just no hope of getting it out of there, unless you got the groove tires, and even then, it's a effort to get the fuck out of that sand trap. But yeah, this is going to be something that a lot of people are going to be talking about. But I mean, let's be honest here. It's not going to really hurt Elliott all that much, honestly. I mean, he's going to get. I mean, he locked up the regular season title. He's going to get those 15 extra playoff points. So I think at this point he's got 40 bonus points in the bag going into the playoffs. So he's sitting in pretty good shape, and going into Daytona with, really not much to worry about. Probably don't want to lose a race car, but, because Daytona is Daytona. But, yeah, this was a pretty solid race overall, I would say. There were some shenanigans, but, I mean, compared to some of the races this year, I mean, especially compared to some road courses, especially at Wetkins Glen in the past, this was a pretty clean affair overall. So I will say that. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this with the news of the week. There's not a whole hell of a lot of news to talk about, so let's go ahead and get into it. Sorry, I forget to do my transition. There we go. Alright, so as per the usual, we start with the ratings from the previous week. Richmond pulled in 2.39 million viewers on the USA Network, and yeah, that doesn't sound like a whole hell of a lot of viewers, but when you compare it to last year, the event was up 25.5% compared to last year, which was at 1.78 million on NBCSN as a playoff race. Yeah, that is quite the increase. 25.5% up to 2.39 million viewers on the USA Network. So, while the numbers are still not there here late in the season, I mean, they are going up when you look at last year comparing it to this year. So, I mean, it is heading in the right direction overall. And then we have a couple more deals, which is basically silly season shit, as per the usual. Ryan Blaney signs a long-term extension with Penske, which shouldn't really be that big of a surprise. I mean, despite the fact that Blaney doesn't have a win yet this year. I mean, he does have the All-Star win. I mean, he's second in points right now. This is last time I checked. Hold on, let me check Racing Reference real quick. Go up, I got the Glen. No, Kyle Larson actually moves up to second with his win. But Blaney is still third in points overall. I mean, top 3 in points. You know, despite, you know, not having a win this season. I mean, it shouldn't be that much of a surprise that Ryan Blaney is going to get a long-term extension. And then lastly, Eric Almirola may be putting retirement on hold. There was a report from motorsport.com, our good pal Jim Utter, that said that Eric Almirola may be coming back to the 10 car for next year. But then Almirola kind of came out and said, well, I'm not really sure if I want to come back yet. I'm still thinking about it. Like before, he was kind of, the retirement deal was kind of set in stone. But as the season has gone on, he's been kind of like, well, I don't know if I want to retire yet or not. So, yeah, I think that motorsport.com report was a little premature. And there's been a lot of things this year in terms of like contracts and shit that have been really premature, like the whole Alex Palou, Chip Ganassi situation in IndyCar right now, which has been absolutely fucking batshit insane. So there's that going on. But would Eric Almirola decide to return? I mean, it's entirely up to him. But I guess he's going to be invited back to the 10 car if he is. So there's that, I suppose. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. And that's pretty much it as far as the news of the week is concerned. So let's go ahead and get into the race review itself. So this is episode number 151 of The Fuel. GoBowling.com at the Glen. Title of the episode, Wetkins Glen. I don't know. I mean, I think it makes sense if you watch the first part of this race. But the race was actually delayed quite a bit due to lightning delay, and then they had the cars on the track while it was still raining, but they decided to bring them back in for a bit because there was just too much puddling around the track, so they got the puddling cleaned up. And then once the rain subsided a little bit, they let them back out onto the track and got the race underway. There were quite a few cars that had to go to the rear of the field due to a bevy of issues. William Byron with an electrical issue, Ty Gibbs with a suspension change, Kyle Busch had to change the engine, Christopher Bell also had to change an engine, Cody Ware with a ballast issue. There was some tungsten that managed to get loose from the 51 car and basically nearly hit a couple of bystanders over in the bus stop. There was one jackass on Twitter that was trying to say, well, it was a mistake. I mean, it's, you know, this guy on here was like, you know, was being a fucking jackass. I mean, there was someone that said, he was like, hey, let's relax, and he thanked when nobody was hurt. Everyone makes mistakes, let's not crucify him. And it's like, this mistake could have crucified, someone else replied, this mistake could have crucified a spectator. Bring the effing hammer down, suspension, fine, points, everything. And then the guy replied, yeah, so does the driver sending other cars into the catch fence. Crucify them, a crew member made a mistake. And then I replied, do you have any idea how much damage tungsten can do, especially when it flies off race cars? It's a major safety violation and they need to be punished accordingly. Stop with the bullshit. That's funny because I never received a reply back from him, so he probably knew he was way in the wrong in that case, because what he was saying was fucking nonsense. Let's not crucify them. Fuck that. I mean, what a fucking ignoramus. Does he have any idea how much damage tungsten can do? Tungsten is heavy as fuck. I mean, why do you think they put it inside the race car for ballast? to get the cars to the proper weight they're supposed to be at. Some people are just fucking stupid, man. Anyways, Kyle Tilley also had to go to the rear field for adjustments, and Daniel Kvyat to the rear as well for adjustments. And this was also a bit of a historic race because there were 7 different countries represented in this race, the most in Cup Series history. Obviously, the United States was represented because I think like 32 different drivers were represented. But there were 6 other countries that were represented. Of course, you had former Formula One world champion Kimi Räikkönen, the Iceman, driving the Project 91 car for Trackhouse Racing from Finland. Daniel Suarez, of course, is from Mexico. And you have Loris Heiseman from the Netherlands, Mike Rockenfeller from Germany, Daniel Kvyat from Russia, and Kyle Tilley from the United Kingdom. So 7 different countries were represented in this race, the most in Cup Series history. That's kind of crazy. Anyways, so stages broke down like this. Stages 1 and 2 were 20 laps, with stage 3 being 50 laps. And as a result, stage 2 would be considered the quote-unquote halfway point, since the finish of stage 2 came sooner than the midway point of the race. So just in case there was some crazy weather that came about, the end of stage 2 was the cutoff point. So stage number 1, 20 laps. The start of the race was actually single file, which you don't normally see that on the start of a race, but after what happened at Circuit of the Americas last year, they wanted to play it safe. So the start of the race was single file. Chase Elliott started from the pole. We had a good clean start in the wet. One car actually missed the bus stop. Elliott led lap 1. Cindric gets into Allmendinger in turn 1 after locking up the wheels, but Allmendinger continues on and actually gives one hell of a run. Michael McDowell tries to close on Elliott for the race lead, while Reddick challenges Larson for third. The top 4 were within 1.1 seconds of each other. LaJoie and Harrison Burton also spun in turn 1 at the same time as AJ Allmendinger, but they all kept it going. McDowell passes Elliott in the S's for the race lead for our first pure lead change on lap 4. Reddick gets by both Larson and Elliott to move up to second. Larson misses the bus stop and has to come to a complete stop as a result, while Justin Haley has to make an unscheduled stop to reattach the window net. Kind of a silly mistake there. Blaney starts reporting his fuel pressure gauge was not working, which is not good considering that you need to figure out what your fuel mileage is. Several drivers come in to switch to slick tires because there was a bit of a dry line starting to form, and there were several drivers that came in to switch to the slick tires, which once you get to the point where drivers or teams are using the wet tires, then once track dries out, then whatever the teams decide to do from that point on as far as tires is up to them. So several teams made the switch to the slick tires. Reddick was right on McDowell's bumper for the race lead. The top 2 have put 10 seconds on the rest of the field at this point. Todd Gilliland was up to third on this first run. I was like, huh? Wow. So both of the front row motorsports cars were up there at the front. First and third, in fact. Gilliland pits from the lead on Todd Gilliland. McDowell actually then came in for fresh slicks. And then Gilliland pits from the lead on lap 13. Reddick pits on the next time around. Briscoe, the first to pit for fresh slicks, was up into the lead pack at this point because slicks versus wets is about 4 to 5 seconds a lap. Reddick misses the bus stop and has to do a stop and go in that area. Briscoe, McDowell, and Buescher blow by Larson and Elliott, who are still on the rain tires. and Briscoe ends up with our second pure lead change on lap 16. And then McDowell starts hounding Briscoe for the race lead. Buescher was not far behind. McDowell and Buescher then pit again, this time for fuel. Chase Briscoe wins stage number 1. Very entertaining first stage. I'm going to tell you something right now. The first stage of this race was more entertaining than the first stage of each of the last 3 races combined. This is why Wetkins Glen is one of my favorite tracks on the circuit, because we actually see some damn good racing. Chase Elliott, as a result of the finishing order and Ryan Blaney not scoring any stage points, Chase Elliott clinches the regular season title and the 15 bonus points that come with it, the 15 playoff points that come with it towards the playoff. So now we come to stage 2, which was also 20 laps, and they were back to double file restarts since the track was now dry enough. Gilliland stays out and leads the start of stage 2. There was 3 wide between Kyle Busch, McDowell, and Ty Dillon for third into the bus stop, with Kyle Busch winning out. Kimi Räikkönen was up to 9th in his Cup debut at this point, and Joey Hand was 6th in number 15 Rick Ware racing car, with LaJoie in 7th. And at this point, I'm just like, what the fuck is this top 10? Logano and Busch starts closing in on Gilliland for the race lead. Logano gets by him in turn 1, but Gilliland does the crossover move. And then Logano gets the lead again at the carousel. And then coming out of the carousel, Gilliland reported that he had a broken axle, which was a real shame because that 38 car was actually stout today. So Logano ends up with the lead on lap 28 for a third pure lead change of the day. And I was like, what the fuck is this top 5? You had Logano and Busch, which isn't so surprising, but then you had McDowell, Ty Dillon, and Joey Hand. Ty Dillon was actually running pretty decently in this race. I think he actually finished in the top 10 in both of the first 2 stages. Where did Ty Dillon ultimately finish? Let me go back to Racing Reference real quick. Because he finished top 10 in the first 2 stages. 16th. So, not ideal, but certainly better than where he had been. I'll tell you that much. But Reddick and Mike Rockenfeller spin in the bus stop after making contact, but they were able to get back going again. Elliott gets by Ty Dillon for 4th. At this point, things start to calm down somewhat. Raikkonen kicks off green flag pit stops on lap 38, which is 2 laps from the end of the stage. And Joey Logano wins stage number 2. And during the pit stops, LaJoie was penalized for equipment out of the box, as was Kyle Busch, who actually got penalized for pitting out of the box, because the nose of his car was just on the line, and that's considered pitting out of the box. I think that's a little ticky-tacky, but you know. Many drivers come in for service, so now we come to stage number 3, which was 50 laps. McDowell stays out and leads the start of stage 3. Cindric nearly bends it in turn 1. He was actually on the grass going into turn 1 as McDowell, Elliott, and Hand go 3 wide in the S's for the lead. And then we actually have our first caution on lap 41 when Kimi Räikkönen and Austin Dillon gets sent in the bus stop after contact between Chastain and Austin Dillon spins the 3. And Räikkönen actually runs over the 27 of Loris Heisemann, which sends them right into the outside wall, and that ends Kimi Räikkönen's day, which was unfortunate. McDowell leads on the restart. Bell moves up to 3rd on the restart. Good start by him. Larson gets by Bell for 3rd. Elliott has a run on McDowell out of the carousel for the race lead for our 4th pure lead change on lap 49. We have a battle for 4th between Bell, Hand, and Allmendinger. That was pretty good. Buescher starts closing in on that battle for the 4th position to make it a 4-car battle. Joey Hand kicks off green flag stops on lap 55, which was supposed to be the final green flag stops of the day. Larson nearly loses it in turn 6 as he was right on McDowell's tail coming out of turn 6. But he saves it, and both McDowell and Larson pit on lap 56. And then Elliott pits from the lead on lap 58 and gets out in front of Larson. Several cars were actually playing the long game at this point, including Cole Custer and Austin Dillon. Briscoe and Chastain made contact and spin in the bus stop, but they get back going. Custer finally pits with 25 laps to go. Cody Ware spins in the bus stop but gets back going. Elliott reclaims the lead from Dillon, who had been staying out. It's not going to be counted as a pure lead change because Elliott had pitted and Austin Dillon had not, because they were on different pit strategies. And Larson falls through the second and is less than a second behind Elliott. Kyle Busch loses it in turn 1 and smacks the turn 1 barrier but gets back going with damage. Dillon finally pits with 13 laps to go, and then we have our second caution on lap 79 when Joey Hand spins in turn 1 after getting loose and into the tire barriers. He does get it back going again, but they have to throw the caution. Well, they didn't really have to, but they threw the caution anyways. So Elliott leads on the restart. AJ Allmendinger actually gets a great restart and gets up to third, but then we get our third and final caution on lap 83 when Loris Heisman spins into the sand trap in turn 6. He was basically all by himself, but I don't know if something broke on the car, but he ends up spinning into the sand trap. So Elliott leads on the restart with 5 laps to go, and then we get what is the biggest contention of the race, especially if you're a Chase Elliott fan or someone who runs the Dawsonville Pool Room Twitter account, which is bitching like a mother. Larson gets the lead from Elliott in turn 1, kind of runs him a little bit wide into the runoff, but it's a battle for the lead. He didn't technically wreck his teammates, so, you know, I think at that point it's fair game, especially late in the race. And then Elliott starts getting drop kicked back to the field a bit, but he does recover. Reddick moves up to 4th in the whole deal. Allmendinger moves up to 2nd, and all of a sudden we have an instant replay of the Xfinity race yesterday. It was these two that were racing for the win in the Xfinity race, except that Larson was driving for Dale Jr. at the time. And in this case, Allmendinger ran both races driving the 16 Colic car, and in both cases actually ended up 2nd. Although he gave one hell of a battle to Larson in both cases. Reddick runs wide in turn 6, which allows Elliott to regain 4th, and Kyle Larson holds Allmendinger at bay to win at Wetkins Glen in what was a very solid race. It was definitely more entertaining than a lot of the previous races that we've seen this season. So, stats and awards. Total laps, it was a 90-lap race, 20, 20, and 50. Overall lead changes, we had 12 overall lead changes in the race, with 4 pure lead changes. So we actually had a bit of an uptick in the pure lead change department. Only 3 caution flags, and we had 3,141 green flag passes, which actually comes out to 39.8 passes on average per green flag lap. So not bad. Lap leader award goes to Chase Elliott, who led 29 laps on the day. Star of the race, this was actually a little bit difficult, but I'm actually going to give it to 2 drivers, basically based on their performance the entire weekend. Kyle Larson and AJ Allmendinger, because they finished 1 and 2 in both races this weekend, in 2 completely different cars. They finished 1-2 in the Xfinity race after a great battle at the end of the race. And then today, in a completely different car, they ended up 1-2 again. So, I mean, what else can you say? Larson and Allmendinger did a hell of a job this weekend. Reject of the race goes to Ross Chastain, and here's why. This isn't really about the incident between him and Austin Dillon midway through the race that caused his teammate to end up, Kimi Räikkönen, to crash. But this is basically because of the fact that it seems like over the past month or so, it just seems like he's been involved in an incident in every race the past month. And while I have criticized some drivers for being a bunch of prima donnas, you know, and some people have been blaming Chastain just for the sake of blaming Chastain, at some point Chastain has got to try to reel it in a little bit, because while it's good that he is aggressive and he's a damn good driver, the problem is he's making way too many enemies going into the playoff. I mean, he's made like 9 different people mad at him at this point. And while I think, like I said, a couple of those drivers are a bunch of bitch-made motherfuckers, at the same time, Chastain is getting himself a bit of a reputation, and it's not really a good one. And he even has a term now. You know, if you get wrecked by him, you've been chastained. I mean, that's not exactly a flattering thing to have. You know, people want to be, you know, revering you for your driving talent, not the fact that you're chastaining people. I mean, I know I wouldn't want to have that reputation. Of course, he's always said that he's afraid to change his driving style because he might lose that edge. And while I understand that to a certain extent, the aggressiveness has been costing him as of late. He hasn't had a top 10 finish in the last 5 races. Despite the fact that, you know, he's had the most top 5s this season with 10, and he has 2 wins on the year, but, I mean, he's got to try to reel it in a little bit. So, like I said, I'm not afraid to call it like it is. I mean, has Chastain been entertaining for a lot of fans this year? Sure, but, I mean, there are also a lot of times where he needs to learn to reel it in. And that's all I gotta say. Race results and point standings. Here's your top 10 finishers. Kyle Larson led just the last 5 laps, but they were the most important ones. A.J. Allmendinger comes home in 2nd. Joey Logano 3rd. Chase Elliott 4th after leading the most laps from the pole. Daniel Suarez with a very quiet 5th. Michael McDowell, pretty sure he's pretty disappointed with that 6th place finish, considering that he had a pretty good car early in the race. Tyler Reddick had all manner of troubles in this race, but salvages a 7th place finish. You have Christopher Bell, Chris Buescher, or as a lot of people have started calling him now, Christopher Buescher, because Dale Jr. started doing it last week just for the hell of it, and now it's become a bit of a thing on the broadcast. Dale Jr. commands a lot of power, if you haven't noticed. And Eric Jones with a very quiet top 10 finish. So, point standings, heading into the final race of the regular season, and because of the fact that we didn't have a different winner this time around, Kurt Busch is now locked into the playoff, despite the fact that he's sitting out the rest of the regular season. He's not going to be at Daytona either because of the concussion issues that he suffered at Pocono. So he's sitting out the rest of the regular season. So hopefully he'll be back for the first race at the Southern 500. But you see the field, 15 different drivers have scored victories. And the battle for that spot, as far as points are concerned, are between Ryan Blaney and Martin Truex Jr. Truex 25 points back going into Daytona. So needs a freaking miracle to happen, I'll tell you that much. NASCAR standings with F1 points. The Xfinity Series has really tightened up. Justin Allgaier crashed early in the race. Ty Gibbs had a chance to win the race to really score some big points on Allgaier, but got into a bit of a scuffle with William Byron in the bus stop near the end of that race. And A.J. Allmendinger had a good points day. So only 4 points separate the top 3 at this point. As the roulette at the top continues, Ty Gibbs regains the point lead, but he only has a 3-point advantage over Allmendinger and only a 4-point advantage over Justin Allgaier. And Noah Gragson, despite his points penalty from earlier this season, is not that far behind either. He's only 18 points behind the lead. And the most you can gain or lose is 42. So, top 4 are not that far apart from each other. Josh Berry's kind of fallen off a little bit, but you know, he's still part of that main 5 that's going to be competing for the championship. Then you have Austin Hill at 222, Sam Mayer at 7th, Brandon Jones, Riley Hurst, and Daniel Hemrick, who took a hard hit into the wall in the carousel, running at the top 10. And Trevor Bayne is the only other driver that is in triple digit in points. Cup points, not really so close since Chase Elliott decided to turn the burners on. He now has a 56-point advantage over Ross Chastain. Kyle Larson closes the gap a little bit on Chastain with his win. You have Logano, who had a good points day, Ryan Blaney, Christopher Bell, Kyle Busch, Tyler Reddick, Martin Truex Jr., and Denny Hamlin round out the top 10. Denny Hamlin was non-existent in this race today, which is a shocker. Then you have William Byron, Kevin Harvick, who's also a bit of a non-factor. You know, this is a guy that's coming off back-to-back wins. Daniel Suarez, Kurt Busch, Alex Bowman, Chase Briscoe, Austin Cindric, and Bubba Wallace. Those are the drivers that are in triple digits in points. And then you have Eric Almirola and Eric Jones rounding out the top 20. As for my final rating for the GoBowling.com at the Glen, like I said, this was a solid race. I mean, there were a bit of lolly moments, and a bit of dull moments in there, especially during the end of the second stage and a bit of the third stage. But overall, I mean, that first stage was a fucking banger. Like, the racing in that first stage was unbelievable. And then you had a good battle at the end for the win, you know, in the third stage. So, overall, I'm going to give this race a solid 7 on the fuel gauge. So, 7 out of 10. Could it have been better? Yeah, it could have been better. But, I mean, Watkins Glen usually turns out pretty damn good races. And this one was no exception. So, even though it does say a 7, it's on the high-end spectrum of the 7. I mean, it's just shy of getting an 8. If we didn't have those 2 cautions at the end, I probably would have given this race an 8, in all likelihood. But I'm going to give it a nice, high-range 7 for today's race, which is still pretty good, considering how strict I can be with how I rate this shit. But that's going to do it for tonight's edition of The Fuel. Like I said, another short one. You know, not really a whole lot to talk about. It was a solid race. Very solid race. With some rain. Not really a whole lot to talk about as far as news. Just some silly season shit, as we did last week. And we'll be ready to rock and roll for the Coke 0400 next week at Daytona, which will be out on Saturday night. So, probably see a noon fuel episode or something of that nature next week. But or maybe I'll burn the midnight oil Saturday night and do the fuel on, you know, late Saturday night. Who the fuck knows? But that's going to do it for tonight's edition of The Fuel. Thank you very much for watching. And until next time, this is the Packer Man signing out. See you later. Thank you for watching tonight's video. Be sure to like and subscribe, you jackweeds.